Okay, so we are all set up, we can start. Doesn't work? Press and hold. Does it work now? Yes, it works. You have a volume set. All good? Yes? All of you? Good. Okay. Are we good on the technical part? Yeah. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this panel discussion. Today we are going to talk about a really important aspect, a crucial aspect when we tackle a global socio-environmental issue like climate change. It works also for all of these global socio-environmental aspects like poverty, inequality, marine conservation, or biodiversity. I mean, we have to talk together. So we are going to talk about cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinarity. Yesterday, we talked about that on education considerations, because it's really important also to change education, higher education into that. But today we are going to address interdisciplinarity in research and innovation. So you know that the magnitude and the interconnected nature of these global challenges, like climate change, but I say again, like biodiversity, inequalities, poverty, and more, it demands a response that transcends the traditional boundaries of the disciplines. And we just say that just before starting the panel, science, when it's siloed, it only have a look to fragments of the problem. So that's why we need to work together. So today, we will explore how embracing this approach will enable us to find solutions. Good news, the paradigm shift is already underway. That's why you're here. You're already working on that from different perspectives. We are going to talk about that from a ministry level, from a UN body level, from a European level, but also from academia from different continents in Asia, Europe, and South America. My name is Christophe Moquet. I'm from Université Côte d'Azur in the south of France, and I'm director of the international but also interdisciplinary master program that combines science and socio-economy of marine resources. It's called MARES, and I will be the facilitator of this panel. So I already talked too much, so with no further ado, I give the floor to Asuncion Cristas, Associate Professor at Nova School of Law. Asuncion is former Minister of Agriculture, the Sea, the Environment, and Special Planning in the Portuguese Republic. So you've got a really extensive experience bridging policy, governance, and environmental stewardship. I feel really privileged to give you the floor.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here with you and share the panel with you. My experience, and I right now have two different hats. I'm a law professor at Nova School of Law, but I teach not only law, I teach ocean policies as well in a master's degree in law and economics of the sea, ocean governance, that I coordinate. And I'm pretty much engaged in preparing a totally interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary bachelor's, so undergraduate studies dedicated to the ocean, that is ocean studies, that will start next September. And that will bring 5 different schools from my University Nova de Lisboa and 2 other universities, the Algarve and Évora. And the 5 different schools are science and technology, law, of course, but mainly management and economics, and also social sciences, and also data science. So the idea is to just make sure that we can start working with a common language and let people at least know a little bit of what the others are doing, so that they can act as facilitators and bringing the bridges between the extra super specialists that we have and we need with other different disciplines and scientific disciplines. And that is a view that I gained as minister when I was in government, because I saw in government and in the Portuguese Parliament as well, because I saw things pretty much fragmented, as you said. So each body of the public administration, each ministry, I would normally say that the Council of Ministers is a federation of ministers. It's really hard to overcome these silos ideas, because everyone is so focused on their own topics, on their own public bodies, on their own specific concerns, that it's very easy to miss the central point and to find out ways of collaboration and of sharing knowledge and working together. And I guess that right now what we have, it's an extraordinary complex world with extremely difficult challenges. Climate change is one of them, but when we link between climate and ocean, and this is a nexus that we need always to reinforce, because it's not that clear for everybody, and that's a whole amount of topics to discuss and to address. We feel that we need everybody at least to be able to communicate, to work together, and to understand a little bit of what the other is doing. It's the only way, in my view, to guarantee that we'll finally find good solutions, and solutions that don't stay connected only with the starting point of each view, because the problem, I guess, is that every one of us think that the solution comes from our side, or thinks that we should do everything because this is the big solution that will come out, and that's not how it works. It works if everybody can bring their own solution. The point is that normally it's very difficult to maintain a good and fruitful dialogue among the different sciences, because the language is different, the concepts are very different, and it's very difficult to simplify it. And as academics, we all know that when we simplify, of course, we lose something, but simplify and maintaining the core issues and the truth, it's really a challenge, and I guess that's where we should all focus. I can see that also from a political perspective. The problems are very complex. Populism is all about creating the idea that we have a bunch of very easy solutions for difficult topics, and the point is, how can we guarantee that we are working hard, intensely, with deep analysis, and at the same time be able to share that knowledge with the others and bring the others on board. That's what we're trying to do, and that's what I see in my other hat, that is a practitioner, as a lawyer in a law firm in Portugal. What I see, the companies and their challenges and their concerns, they do depend on different angles of observation and different angles of solutions. And I guess that universities and research and education need to adapt and make sure that we do our research and prepare our students to interact and to collaborate and to work with respect with the other views and with the other sciences. I think this is really what we need to do nowadays.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience. Really interesting that you saw that also as minister, that it's hard to de-silo, if I understand correctly, these ministerial activities to work together, and not because they don't want, I guess, just because they work hard on their own expertise. But it's really interesting that now that you're on the side of academia, that you're also participating. So it's 5 different schools: science and technology, law, management, and economics, social science, and data science. Good luck.
And 2 other universities, yes. Yeah. 3 universities in ours, which is a leading university, yeah. 5 different students. And hopefully I wanted to do this internationally, but then when I started working, it was so difficult to bring these 5 different schools to work together and to decide which would be the courses. Can we share some courses? What will be the contents and so on? Well, we decided to downgrade a little bit the ambition, say, okay, let's make it firstly at a national level, and then of course do all the interchange, and then we will move into an international level, because this is really different and hard work.
It's already a fantastic update in the process. Also, I found really interesting that you're sharing the importance of sharing knowledge and knowledge from different disciplines, but really important and core knowledge to combat misinformation. I understand it's also about that misinformation, especially with more populist decision makers. So we really need that, clearly.
We need that definitely. We need to make sure that people understand that there are no difficult topics that can be addressed only with one solution. And there is never one single cause of anything. And we need to tackle all the different causes and to build smart, intelligent solutions. And for that, we need different angles and perspectives. And we need to elaborate on the capacity to hear each other, but hear and understand what the different topics are saying.
So there's no magical solution aside from talking to each other and finding solutions together.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you so much. So let's move to you, Co. Co Barrett is a Deputy Secretary General of WMO, so the World Meteorological Organization. So Co, you're a global leader in climate science now, and so I'm really looking forward to your point of view on that.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for inviting me, because this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. It comes, of course, from sitting in an international organization that, you know, first and foremost has to represent our diverse membership of almost 200 countries. But I also, previous to this position, was a vice chair of the IPCC. And in that role, we assess the state of climate knowledge. And we do it across the entire globe. And I think through both of these perspectives, it kind of reinforces something that I've seen very clearly set out in the research on this topic, which is, as the former minister said, if you're going to set out to solve a complex problem, like in my case, climate change, you really need to look at it from every angle. You know, the innovative solutions come from looking at it from everyone's perspective. So it is really basically an issue of creating a diverse and inclusive process. You know, when you do that, you are kind of able to check the unconscious biases that each of us bring to the table. And, you know, when I say unconscious bias, it sounds like it's a negative thing. Let's all recognize our brains require biases, right? Otherwise, we'd be taking in so much information and not being able to, you know, sort it out and cross the street without getting hit by a bus, right? So we all are constantly shutting out information we don't think is necessary in order to efficiently work in the world. However, sometimes when we do that, we shut out information that's actually important. And and that's why bringing a diverse set of perspectives to the table helps to ensure that the things that I shut out are not necessarily shut out from the conversation, especially as they're important. So we each help each other to bring our perspectives to the table that ensure that the information we should be considering is actually on the table. And for me, again, that's the importance of diversity. So when people talk about, you know, the importance of gender inclusion and geographic representation as in WMO, yes, it has value in and of itself, but it is at the core important because we are bringing the diverse perspectives of our members from around the world to the table in helping to find solutions. So, so that's the key of it for me. And I think, as the former minister said, you know, if you bring a table full of engineers to the table, they're going to give you an engineering solution, even if that's not what you're looking for, right? So that's why diversity ends up being critical to complicated problems like climate. And, you know, I believe that the true power of diversity is the ability to tackle complex problems through cross and interdisciplinary approaches. So, in my experience, there are kind of three key things that go into kind of addressing this. The first is that when you're looking at creating this cross and transdisciplinary kind of approaches or solutions, you need to bring the diverse group together when you're setting the questions, right at the beginning. Because a lot of times, if you don't do that, you've already limited where you're going. And it is difficult sometimes because you are facilitating a conversation across disciplines where sometimes people speak in different jargons, they don't actually have the same shorthand, so you're actually creating a community out of people who maybe are not naturally in that community. But it is important to kind of engage at the question setting stage. The second thing that's important is when you do that, then you need to create a safe environment so that the diverse voices can feel like they are able to speak freely. Now in IPCC, for example, where we're bringing lots of scientists together from across the world to assess the state of climate knowledge, sometimes a very young climate scientist from the global south is sitting in a room with a long established climate expert, and it can be a daunting thing to feel like you have something to offer or feel like you are empowered to speak. But as conveners of this type of approach, it is our responsibility to make sure that we are seeking them out, to offer their perspectives, giving them that safe place to, and letting them know that their perspective is valuable. And then the last thing I'll say is, once you've gone through this process and you've, engaged in whatever it is that you're addressing from a transdisciplinary approach, it's important to socialize the outcomes back to communities through their trusted community members. Because the messenger matters. And it is really helpful for a trusted member of a community to be bringing information back to their constituency and representing what is a diverse outcome, but also having the trust of the people that they're talking to. So we know from communication research on climate, for example, that sometimes this piece, having a trusted communicator, is key to getting any message through at all. If you are somebody who doesn't believe in a multilateral international world and the IPCC tells you something about climate change, it's not coming from a community that you necessarily trust. So you're kind of fighting an uphill battle. But I think those three kind of issues are really essential to approaching the issue at hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Ko. Thank you. So thank you, Ko. So at WMO, so I understand that you're assessing the status of climate knowledge. I understand that for you, innovation is diversity. And that I find it really, really interesting. You talked about the biases, and it's true that it's maybe the first time I really hear that one of the important things in interdisciplinarity is recognize that we are all biased. Once again, there is no one magical solution, and that when we work together, we have to find a way to overcome our bias. And I was about to ask you, how do we do that? But you answered to my question already with the different points. The safe environment, something really, really important, that we have to feel, that people have to feel that they have something to offer, even when they're at the table with someone who is really globally recognized already. But how do you do that? Can I ask you?
Well, within WMO and also in IPCC, we actually train people. We train people to be facilitators in a way that draws people out from maybe their shyness or feeling like they're not worthy of sitting at a table. It really does. You can't just rely on people to all be skilled at doing it. It really does take training, or even just pointing out, like, we are here because we want to hear all the views. So let's make sure that we do it.
And do you do that also with the relay to the community? Because you talked about socializing the outcomes back to the communities. And if I understand it correctly, you say that you develop trust communication, so relay to the community. Can I ask you also how you develop that?
Yeah, I mean, at least in my experience, we don't necessarily have to train that person. They're already a member of the community, but they're very effective communicators because they can bring back the outcomes that represent not only the discipline that the community is very well ensconced in, but they also bring the greater kind of transdisciplinary findings back to their community, and that's not something we've had to train.
It's quite natural.
Yeah, it's kind of natural. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you avoid, having the wrong person?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I can't say that we always have the right person, but just recognizing the value of a trusted member is getting you half the way there. But yeah, it's not always perfect.
Thank you for honesty. Thank you, Co. So we will move on. So from a ministry point of view, from Portugal, from a UN body, the WMO, let's go to European point of view. Not only the European point of view, but also Italy. So Marta Dalla Vecchia is representing Science Europe here in the European Commission. So Marta serves also as the director of the IFEN Service for Safety, Health and Environment in Italy. So you are at the forefront of integrating sustainability and safety in scientific research.
Yes.
So it's a pleasure to hear from you.
It's a pleasure for me to be here. I have prepared also some slides that I don't know.
Slides are coming.
If we can share. And thank you very much for your invitation. I'm a member of the working group on greening research of Science Europe, and I would like, I don't know in which way.
Just have to say next.
Next, please. Of Science Europe, just a few words to present you Science Europe, that is the association that represents a national public organization that fund and perform research in Europe. As you can see, Science Europe has 40 members that represents 29 countries in Europe, not only in the European Union, but in the whole Europe, as you can see in the map. And our member organizations spend 25 billion of euro per year in research. So the next one, please. And I work at the National Institute for Nuclear Physics in Italy, as you have seen. And INFNN is a member of Science Europe and also a member of its governing board, and it is the Italian research agency to study fundamental physics. It was founded in 1951, and now we has about 5,000 researchers that work in all the most important international physics labs, and the INFN has also 4 national labs in Italy and 20 divisions inside the most important universities in Italy. And of course we are working hard to reduce the carbon footprint of our activities. So the next one, please. So today I would like just to present the job that Science Europe has done about this important matter that is interdisciplinarity for the net zero transition, and then to share with you some key messages. So if you can go to the next again. Okay, so the next one, please. Okay, here you can see what the job that Science Europe has done in the last years. We started moving from COP26, and in that occasion we launched the call to action to research organization for the net zero transition, and then we wrote a values framework for the organization of research. And in this paper you can see that we underlined the importance of inter and transdisciplinarity as main elements of the value of collaboration. And in the last year we wrote a guidance on science for policy activities, and just in this month a framework for the environmental sustainability of a research organization that included the importance of inter and transdisciplinarity approach. So the next one. And I would like to start with the call to action, because in this call to action we say that we share a vision of a world where research and education communities work together and in interaction with industry and society at large to solve urgent global challenges. So what we did is to invite other organizations that share our vision to commit to these actions and work with us towards a sustainable future with net zero emission. And the action we indicated, some action that had to move into 6 main areas that you can see there. And the first one was the interdisciplinary approach to respond to the complexity of the net zero challenges. Is the first area that we indicated to the research organization to cope the climate crisis. So the next one, if it's possible. Okay, so I will, the next one please. So I would like to share with you some messages. The first one is why the interdisciplinarity is so important, because of course we know that sustainability needs to balance economical, social and environmental dimensions. So the green transition is a complex and a multidimensional societal challenge and can only be solved by mobilizing all the stakeholders in the whole society. So interdisciplinarity needs to become a mainstream in research project. And if you can go to the next, we think that the research institutions well know the importance of interdisciplinarity, but the problem is that the initiatives in interdisciplinarity need to be scaled up to accelerate the net zero transition, because it's not important also to know that interdisciplinarity is very important, but also to use this experience for the net zero transition. So if we can go to the next. So for this reason, the second message that I would like to share today is the importance to lead by example, because we know that universities or research organizations are already greening their activities, but these experiences should be further promoted to lead by example. For this reason, in the last job of Science Europe, that is this framework to the environmental sustainability of research organization, we offer tools to promote environmental sustainability on a systematic level. So in this way, we think that starting from our example, research organizations should motivate other sectors to speed up their transition to net zero. So please, the third message is the importance to involve students and the young generation. Because in Italy, when we wanted to educate to save water or to recycle waste, we say speak to the children, to teach to their parents, because students are a leading force for the net zero transition, and their involvement in the interdisciplinary teaching and research activities brings positive change and should be encouraged. We don't have to forget that the students are the future leaders. and the future experts, and they can be the future agents of change towards climate sustainability. So if you can go, the fourth message is about the importance to reinforce science policy interactions, because transdisciplinary approach is essential in science policy interaction, because it provides policymakers with a comprehensive overview of available options and their implication. We can find a lot of examples in the local communities where the involvement of research and students can provide relevant impact. And for this reason, we think that research organizations can act as intermediaries, facilitating the exchange in both directions, identifying policy demands and relevant research findings, and then enabling the interplay between science and decision making. And the last message is again that we have to act together. Because university and research organizations are considered among the most neutral organizations, and they have a privileged position to mobilize other actors. So to establish common platforms with the university, research organization, government, business sector, and other societal stakeholders should be encouraged. To cope the climate crisis, a meaningful and inclusive stakeholder engagement should be mainstreamed in the national and local level to speed up the transition towards net zero. So we can go to the conclusion and the next step that we would like to take, that is of course to keep on mobilizing research organization, and then Science Europe would like to develop other guidance with concrete steps for research organization, with a lot of examples to share together, and then of course to promote and support the scale up of the existing experiences. So thank you, and thank you.
Thank you, Marta. Okay, very inspiring. We know more now with about Science Europe action. So if I noted correctly, 40 members. So it goes beyond the boundaries of European Union, 30 countries, 25 billion euros per year in research. I think it's important to notice. I find really interesting that you see that interdisciplinarity in science is recognized now, so by Europe, as an important aspect of how projects should be conceived in universities in research, especially to reach net zero transition. So it means that when you open calls, do you have specific parts on the calls to foster interdisciplinary programs?
Yes, because I think that if you work in science, you know that it's important in interdisciplinarity. For instance, in my field, that is physics, we work with the biologists, the medical, and so on. The problem is to force this job towards the net zero transition, because we work for medicine, we work for I don't know, biological effect of radiation and so on. We sometimes the efforts are not focused in the net zero transition, because scientists can work together, but the problem is for what? And so the net zero transition is becoming to become the first one of the main projects that at what we can work together.
Okay, it's good to know that Science Europe will be more into that now, and also it's good to recognize that universities and laboratories, research organizations are already reducing their impact. You say most neutral organizations, but it's also good to see that Science Europe provides tools for that.
Yes.
And also, if I try to finish by summing up, you fostering science policy interactions and also student commitment in searching effective actions.
Yes, because this is why I say that it's very important to lead by examples, because our organization have a lot of initiatives for the greening transitions, to reduce the carbon footprint and so on, but to share all the examples and is a way to
Make it effective.
Yes, but also to involve other organizations to do the same. So I think that if with these tools and with the examples, we can force other organizations to aid us in moving towards the
can help to
yes,
join
the net zero transition. Yes.
Thank you, Marta. So now we are going to law, also back to law. We're going to Singapore with Danielle. Danielle Yeo, you're a lead on climate law and policy at the National University of the Singapore Center for International Law. Danielle is also adjunct associate professor in the MSc Environmental Management program, and so you specialize in legal framework, driving, as I said just before, so climate resilience and international cooperation. The floor is yours, Danielle.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the invitation and also for the very illuminating comments by previous speakers. My background, just to share a little bit, is really more as a generalist public international law practitioner for close to 30 years with the governments of Singapore. And more recently now, I'm kind of doing a hybrid, an academic in the Center for International Law, where we focus on thought leadership for the Asia-Pacific region. I also spend part of my time as a practitioner and also as a consultant with a global geopolitical risk advisory. And a lot of the comments that I've heard actually harken to my own experience, because when I left the service at that time, I realized that for students, for law students, and I'm focusing on law students and on legal practice, there was a lot of interest in specialization. I want to be the best investment lawyer, the best arbitrator, the best law of the sea practitioner. But there's very little and not enough, I think, of that cross-disciplinary approach. And I think generalists at one time were not seen as being as important, but I think their importance have risen, particularly in an area like climate, which is so cross-dimensional and so interdisciplinary. And so what I try to do at the center, what we're trying to do at the center is also part of my mission is to try and address that issue. Martha talked about the importance of science policy interface. I would add science policy law interface. And the reason being it's driven by science. The interdependencies and the interactions between what science tells us about the climate, about the ocean, about the biodiversity, about food security, things like that, really drives home the point that you really need to have robust policies guided by robust science, and lawyers must come with the same mindset in order to provide the proper legal advice, strategic advice that would guide the policy decision makers, which I think is a very critical part of our role, and also to guide businesses when we are advising businesses about all these different dimensions which they may not ordinarily be aware of. And so that goes to the why of why we think this is particularly important. Nobody has a monopoly of knowledge, and it's only when we synthesize the relevant disciplines. Not an easy task. Lawyers by profession sometimes are very territorial, or sometimes they may feel that, we know everything, we don't need to consult others. But I think it's very, very important to address that mindset. And how can we do that? From the students to professionals, how do we do that? And that's what we try to do. Let me give an example of where this comes to mind very, very clearly to me. And this is a recent advisory opinion by the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea, advisory opinion on climate change. And what did the tribunal have to do there? And what the tribunal did, in fact, engage on is what has been described as systemic integration of different disciplines of public international law, ocean governance and climate governance. One of the big questions was, how did the two different disciplines of law interact? And this was a difficult question. And the tribunal spoke about this and interpreted, for example, how the principle of common and differentiated responsibility, how does that work, and how can that be interpreted? And if you, let's say, comply with, if you're consistent with the Paris Agreement, does that mean you are therefore also meeting your obligations under UNCLOS? Those are different principled questions which ITLOS spoke on, and that was also done very much against the context of science. That could not have been possible without scientific expert evidence before the tribunal. And so the next point now is to look at the ICJ decision that's going to be looking at advisory opinion on climate change, and that's going to come up in December. The oral submissions are going to come in December, where we will see very clearly, in very tangible terms, how different disciplines of international law collide or interact. Collide perhaps is a wrong word to use, it sounds very ominous, but it is really how they intersect. And how do they intersect with science and different disciplines of science? I'm excited by what that decision and those two decisions will show the light in terms of where legal practitioners, legal educators actually need to go. And with that, let me just share a little bit about what we are doing at the center and what we are trying to do at the center to bridge this issue. Our mission, of course, as I mentioned, is to provide thought leadership. So in the climate area, the question now is, well, what do we focus on? There's so many issues, and we have, as many academic institutions, limited resources. What area do we choose to focus on? And we have chosen to focus on, of course, we look at issues within climate, like just transitions, global stocktake. But increasingly, we need to look at issues like climate, trade, and investment. What is the interaction? So we have done a series of seminars last year, 6 of them, bringing together government officials, private sector lawyers, private sector corporate figures, civil society, to look at different aspects and how the two disciplines interact. And even looking at things which are not traditionally public international law, ESG, more in the area of corporate, right? But this is something that you cannot ignore now. And so we try to do that. This December, we're actually working with the Columbia Global Center for Energy Policy and the Singapore Ministry of Trade and Industry Academy to look at, to bring together a high-level sort of trade and climate dialogue for the region, precisely to bring together this silo, to break the silos, as we mentioned, between trade officials and climate officials, because they don't necessarily always speak the same language, they don't necessarily attend the same meetings, and even they're both here, they're not necessarily even on the same agenda item. So I think this is one way of trying to do that. What about climate and health, right? So we participated in the ILA One Health paper that looked at the issues of the intersection between climate and health. What about climate and energy? What about climate and the oceans? So many topics to pick on. So that brings me to one learning point that we have as an institution also to focus where we want to prioritize and which partners do we work with. How can we expand our footprint by working across regions? So we have had a very good collaborative partnership with the Durham University for about 2-3 years now. And in that context, we actually put together a joint submission to the global stocktake process together with the International Cryosphere Institute. All right? And just yesterday, we were involved in a joint transitions panel, again looking at different aspects, including even communication and engagement, which was also touched on in this panel today. So these are some little ways, I think, as a legal institution, legal profession needs to work towards. Our minister talked about the interdisciplinary program at the undergrad. And I was quite excited to hear that NUS had a master's program, interdisciplinary master's program for a number of years. Precisely the same model, bringing together the law school, but this is within the same university, the law school, the business school, public policy, and science. And these are for master students who are intending to work in the green economy. So the focus here is on economics really more than anything else. For Singapore, we want to be a green economy hub, but how do we equip the people with the green economy skills? But that means when I'm teaching, and I teach the law module in that course, environmental management, I have to teach them in a very different way from the way I teach law students. Because these are not people with necessarily with legal background, and then definitely not necessarily to be practicing in the legal field. But they need to know, they need to join the dots. So the way we even structure the syllabus, the way we teach them, because these are also students from around the region, we have to bear that in mind. And how do we change our paradigm? And sometimes we can be a little bit conservative, and we need to be able to also change our own paradigm to do that. So these are just some little examples of things we do. The next question then is about partnership. Who are the partners? Within government, within industry, within other international organizations, civil society, so on and so forth. So that brings us to the challenges, in which I think talked a little bit about. Mapping the landscape, prioritizing, finding the right partners, and dissemination. Couldn't agree more. How do we disseminate this useful output so that it goes out to an audience, to the right people, so that the efforts are not wasted? How do we do that? I take this point to just do a shout out for our partners, Durham University, because they've just started this very interesting initiative called the Just Transition Towards a Net Zero Future, and we are supporting institution for that initiative. And the whole idea really is to bring together under one school the different experts from science, from law, from business, so on and so forth, economics, precisely to reach that point. But the challenge is, of course, implementation. But I'm very excited by that. I think that's an important, useful model for institutions, for law schools at least. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for sharing your leadership and geopolitical vision, fostering interdisciplinarity. It's really interesting you said that robust policies have to be driven by robust. Thank you, Ko. I know you have to leave. Thank you for that. Robust, so policies have to be driven by robust science. Also, advising businesses, you say. So, advising businesses, I would say leaders need knowledge. They need science. That's true. My question will be: do they know that, the leaders? I mean, don't
Business
they want
leaders?
business leaders? Do they want advisors like quick? Do they have to be convinced that you have to work interdisciplinary to give advices?
I think for business leaders, what drives them is actually business resilience and profits. You have to be able to speak the language that they listen to. If I tell them you need to have cross-disciplinary, they'll just look at me with like, what are you talking about? I mean, what am I paying you for? Right? So you have to be, the ability to translate the communication, to adjust the communication to the audience, to the listener is very important. Yeah.
So you don't sell the idea that it's interdisciplinary. You
No.
just provide
I
a
just say
solution
this
that
is
works.
important for your business to survive for the next 5 years, something like that.
Thank you so much. So from Asia, we go to Europe with you, Christophe Denauer from Université Côte d'Azur. You're director of an interdisciplinary center, the Academy of Excellence on Risk, Resilience and Sustainable Development. So you lead also innovative research, educational initiatives to integrate sustainability and interdisciplinary approaches in your research. So the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. At University Côte d'Azur, we have created those Academy of Transversal Initiatives, and I think it's a very good idea because that's really one of the rare examples of completely transversals to the disciplines tools to foster transdisciplinary science with money first and incentive as well. And that's what we are doing. So I'm working for one of those initiatives, as you said, which is risk, environment, and resilience. And we try to bring people that usually don't talk together and to manage projects from different perspectives, from what we call hard sciences, but also social sciences, economics, etc., so they can build on projects with different views. And that's what we really insist on, to create transdisciplinary approach. So it's good to create transdisciplinary approach when we know what disciplinary is, actually. And I recognize what you have said. It doesn't mean that we need to lose precisions or we need to lose competencies in disciplinaries. And that's very difficult because we need to cross-link transdisciplinaries, but not losing competencies. And I think that's the hardest task to reach. So that's what we're trying to do with different projects. We are also, for that, trying to advocate what transdisciplinary research will add up to the researcher, because sometimes it's not the case. Sometimes the researchers think that they will lose their time. Or in other cases, as it has been mentioned, they don't speak the same language. So it's very difficult because they just don't understand them, each other. And so we have to put efforts in the system to convince them to speak to each other, to build projects together, and that it's going to be an added value and not a minus value. So I just have an example actually of a book. We don't sell it, so I have no interest. It's a book that we publish at this academy, and every 5 years. And so we have examples of all the projects that we've been fosters in these books. So we can show other researchers, other disciplines, other labs, or we can show them that what is the interest for it. We can show them that it works sometimes if we put the effort in it, and I think that's very, very interesting. Last point, because we are working on transdisciplinarity, and there are a lot of words for that. Interdisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity, cross-disciplinarity, and we usually mix them, and it's difficult to define. But I'd like to read a sentence from actually the manifesto of transdisciplinarity, from which Jacques Monod is one of the co-authors actually, and he says, recognition of the existence of different levels of reality governed by different types of logic is inherent in the transdisciplinarity approach. So I think there are important words in this definition, with different levels, different objectives, but for a complex system. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Christophe. So clearly you're mentioning again that disciplinary research is important, and it's not something to forget, because we talk a lot about interdisciplinarity, but it's the same in education. We mentioned that yesterday. Interdisciplinarity is important, but we have to make sure that to ensure the high level quality of the core knowledge and skills that we need also for example in science, and that we go beyond. So you say that researchers are sometimes sometimes difficult to convince. Sometimes they don't see
reluctant. Yeah.
They don't see the points. They don't speak the same language. It's really something that you say. It's more and more each of you. So the idea of this academy is to offer tools, to help them to work together. Okay. You talk about money. How does that work? What kind of incentives do you propose? Like, is it on research projects for master students, internship, for example, PhDs?
Yeah, we actually offer research packages, but we are not a national foundation, so we work differently. It's completely open, but we are a board of few researchers from different disciplines, law, mathematics, chemistry, geography, and we decide. If the project is not transdisciplinary enough, we can tell them, we'll give you the money because we find the project is interesting, but you need to find another partner in this field because we think it's missing. Of course, we could be wrong, but so since we are the only one to decide, that helps to convince them to go and search for different partners.
Yeah, so it's not just no-go, it's interesting, but let's talk to these other partners, for example.
Yeah, it's never a no-go, but it's a negotiation. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Christophe. So we can go with you, Patricia. So from Asia to Europe to South America. So Patricia, you're the CEO of Mary Foundation. So first, thank you for hosting us in here. Thank you for Cote Solari Foundation. Patricia, well, with Mary, you're a champion of cross-sectoral dimension because, yeah, you develop conservation approach. We see a lot of pictures also here, not only in South America. You're developing conservation, sustainability, social equity. So you have a lot of impact with Mary, and so how do you integrate this interdisciplinary approach in the foundation?
So thank you, Christophe. Thank you for the invitation, and I agree with everything that have been said before. First of all, I wish to say that transdisciplinarity for us, it's a necessary condition for a kind of peaceful and successful agreement, and also an efficient and efficacious one. But obviously, it's the most difficult thing to reach because the common sense doesn't exist. This is the first problem. And somewhere the public administration and the international multilateralism has repeated this kind of segmentation that we find in the science, you know. So obviously, if you want to have a peaceful and efficient agreement and sustainable agreement in time, you need to avoid the natural segmentation that we have in science and in public policy. That was maybe my first learning, what I have learned during before being the CEO of Philanthropy Corte Solari. I was in politics for 6 years, and the first thing I learned was that there is a kind of enormous tensions between the sustainability and that fragmentation of science. But coming back to what we do through Philanthropy Corte Solari and Mary Foundation, we have many examples. One of them is this pavilion, the Science for Climate Action Pavilion. And obviously, I wish to thank again and again the EPCC and the WMO because they trust from the very beginning on this idea, on the idea that we need to try to make an effort in order to develop a space, not only to explain and present the assessment report 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 7, or whatever, and the same for WMO, but also to try to invite people for around the world with other expertise in order to force scientists to move forward, go beyond their limits, and try to maybe try to find some agreement with people that do not think the same and don't have the same experience as you mentioned somewhere. Another example, in particular in Chile, with something also very concrete, even if now it has completely changed that project, but that was very interesting, was the Blue Boat Initiative project. Blue Boat Initiative project was a project where we were trying to protect the whales in North Patagonia, installing a very smart buoy with artificial intelligence in order to prevent the collision between whales and ships. Well, that was the technological part of the project. So after 7 years of a lot of expeditions in North Patagonia, the scientists decide to move forward because we said, okay, we cannot continue the expedition just like this. I mean, we all like science, but eventually we need to have a kind of impact in public policy. And they say, okay, let's go further and let's move to the Blue Boat Initiative, and we're going to install the huge buoy, and that's going to be great. But it wasn't enough. Obviously, this project needs to develop an executive committee with the government there, and we need to develop a consultative committee with many institutions, among others, the EPCC, NOAA, all the ministries that you can imagine. And we also have, and I will never forget this, the scientific committee. You can try to think which was the most difficult one, the scientific one, because we discovered that Chile has more than 3,000 buoys, all completely different around the Pacific. They never agreed on nothing. And I'm an economist, and the scientist has this sense of which is what is correct and what is not correct, you know. So you cannot negotiate the truth, let's say. Then when you are talking with politicians or ministers or economists or, I don't know, sociologists, everything could be, I wouldn't say negotiable, but you understand that there is different logicals, but in science, at least from my perspective, it was more difficult. So it was a great exercise because we really spent 2 years developing these governance, creating the scientific committee, the consultative committee, the communication committee, and the executive committee in order to be able to install one single buoy in the Patagonia. Eventually, the technological project didn't continue because someone tried to destroy the buoy. It was a mass disaster and so on. But the governance was there, and today the government is using those committees, and we have some results, some agreement between public, private, and civil society in order to reduce the speed, for example, of vessels in the North Patagonia. Even if the technology is not there, I'm not saying that we don't need the technology anymore. I'm just saying that maybe we need to understand that science, to be successful, needs governance and need to include in the working table the public, private, and civil society sectors. And that requires time, a lot of time. We never imagined that we would take 2 years before installing the buoy. We promised many times to the board of Marine Foundation that we would take 6 months. It never happened. It took absolutely 24 months to be ready with all the permission that we need to start the project. That was our lessons, at least.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you. Yeah, you say that the pavilion is here to put science at the center of the discussion, but you're right. It's also here to offer scientists from various disciplines in sustainability a possibility to, to connect first and to start maybe working together. And it's a really powerful tool for international and interdisciplinary collaboration. So really thank you for that. Collaboration in research, but also from my point of view, for higher education, it's really powerful. And also thank you for sharing your experience on how to work with politicians and economists and scientists. So okay, we can blame everyone apparently, but I really appreciate something to say that sometimes the result is not always the idea you had at the beginning with the boy, for example, but there is something. There is something, and it's maybe hard, maybe more for a scientist point of view. You say that to accept that, okay, there is something, but it's not really the level we had at the beginning, but it's really important to recognize that at the end there is something.
Thank you. You know, we have a consultant that used to tell me that after 2 years you're going to understand that the wishful thinking at the very beginning, it's not the end. And it's totally true. At the end, the main result was the governance. It's an active for the country, but it wasn't at all what we were looking for at first. Okay, but you cannot ask everyone, all the ministers, to be part of this exercise without understanding that you need to give them something in a positive way, means governance, institutionality, and create a lot of things around the science, which is really important, but we really need to create an ecosystem around that.
Thank you, Patricia. So we are now moving to the last speaker, John Paul. I hope you can hear me. John Paul Rodriguez is professor at the Center for Ecology of the Venezuelan Institute of Scientific Investigation. Hi, John. We can see you. It's great. John Paul is a distinguished ecologist, and so you're joining us online. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be with you. I apologize not to be able to join you in person, but here I am in Caracas. So I will share my screen and have a brief presentation. You should be able to see it, but I should be able to see it as well.
I confirm we can see your screen. You can go full screen.
Great. You can see it in full screen or in...
Not yet. Yes,
yes,
all good.
Yes. Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here again, and thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you to the organizers for including me in the program, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you. All of the work that I do and all the motivation for everything that I do, all my career for the last over 3 decades, has been this, what you can see on the screen, the biodiversity paradox. If you take a map of the world, like you can see there, and you map the distribution of species or any other measure of biodiversity, terrestrial biodiversity, you will often get a pattern like this one. You know, the number of species is highest. Each one of those colors represents the number of species per country of birds. And you can see the number of species is highest in around tropical areas. If you look, I'm very involved with IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and I use a lot their information to quantify the capacity around the world. So if you look at experts, that is the number of members of the IUCN commissions, a global network of volunteers, you can see that the concentration of the experts is in other parts of the world. You look at institutional capacity, the same thing happens. If you look at per capita GDP, the pattern also contrasts sharply with species. So if you take the top 15 countries in those 4 maps, birds, experts, institutions, and per capita GDP, one thing that stands out really very dramatic is that the first column, the number of birds, and the last column, let's call it a measure of financial capacity, there's zero overlap. So the top 15 countries in the world where biodiversity is found, it doesn't match the top 15 countries where the financial power is concentrated. So this is the paradox, and you can see this in a map here. So this is the paradox that motivates my work. You know, how do you build these capacity groups around the world so they match the challenge, so they stand up to the challenge of where biodiversity is? And as you can see, my expertise is in biodiversity, it's not in climate, but I do think, and I'm sure you would agree, that biodiversity and climate are just two sides of the same coin, because a lot of the climate solutions and the tools that we have are linked to biodiversity. I won't go into detail of that, but I will talk a little bit about how I can envision science being involved in the Convention for Biological Biodiversity, primarily in the Global Biodiversity Framework, which was adopted by the parties in December of 2022. Now, if you look at the Global Biodiversity Framework, it has 23 targets. Those targets are divided into 3 groups. The first 8 focus on reducing threats to biodiversity. The next, from 9 to 13, on people's needs, sustainable use and benefit sharing. And the last 10 or so on tools and solutions for implementation. Each one of those little shapes that you see to the right represent what are the targets, and the symbol that the Global Biodiversity Framework uses is the circle that you can see in the middle there, which integrates these 23 targets. Now, the question is, you know, how do we implement this Global Biodiversity Framework, and what are the main characteristics of it? Well, here's where we come down to the interdisciplinary aspects. First of all, it is centered on nature, the power of nature, how nature can respond to the threats and the pressures of humans. And again, here's the link with climate change. You know, nature as a transformative force, as a regenerative power capable of absorbing, if we give her a chance, of absorbing and reversing many of these impacts that we impose on Earth. The second is that it's evidence-based. And evidence-based means not only science from, you know, traditional scientific disciplines, but different forms of knowledge. And that's something that is very present throughout the biodiversity framework, is integrating knowledges, transdisciplinary in the sense of the different knowledge types and different knowledge systems around the world. And the third one is that it really has to have everybody on the table. It's a decentralized and participatory framework that brings together all of the stakeholders in all of their strengths, scientific and otherwise. Now, I will not go into detail of these. These are what I envision the 12 components. Each one of these little symbols represents one component. So the top left, for example, is air, then comes water. The next one is biodiversity with an asterisk, and so on. I will just mention what I see the role of science and interdisciplinary science in 3 of these, the 3 that have asterisks. The first one is biodiversity, the second asterisk is sustainable use, and the third asterisk is science and engagement with the public. And you'll see what I mean But there are other components here, 9 more that I won't talk about today. But what is what I look at as the different things that we need to develop as scientists to contribute to achieving the global biodiversity. So in terms of species, here on the screen, you will see in Spanish the Red List Index of Venezuela. This is one of the headline indicators of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Is a tool developed by the IUCN, the Red List Index. And what it does, it gives you an indicator of the status, the global, the average, the mean status of biodiversity in a place of the world. Now, the key why I bring this here is that development of these indices is by definition transdisciplinary, because it requires participation of people from many, many different sectors, from government, from academia, from private sector, from social, civil society. So the development of the Red List Index, although it's a scientific, seen as a kind of a pure scientific effort, it really is a scientific effort that brings together many different sectors. And this particular tool addresses target 4 on extinction, genes, and conflict, primarily, other targets as well. Now, genetic diversity is at the center of the Global Biodiversity Framework, but genetic diversity is not only about diversity of species in the wild, it is also about human-mediated diversity. So again, here we have a community that ranges, that spans from pure scientists working in genes and DNA and barcoding and all these different things, all the way to how communities manage their resources and produce diversity and food security and so on. And the same thing applies to conflicts as we occupy spaces of species or wild species with our own domesticated species, human and wildlife conflict arise. And this also is a theme that requires integration of scientists, but also of land use managers, of governments, and so on. So the science here is at the service of society more generally. Invasive species, a huge threat around the world. Humans and the way that we move goods in ships, for example, around the world is a main vector of these dispersal of these species around the world. So the impact they have on biodiversity is also connected to our economic system and our socioeconomic system. So once again, a theme that really needs focusing on from many, many different perspectives, not just the pure biological sciences. And citizen science is a way that I see a really important aspect for the future. I really see tools like iNaturalist and eBird, which already feed into the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, but I see many opportunities to integrate people that are not professional scientists or that are not even scientists that work in other disciplines around the world, to really bring together their expertise, their technology, their knowledge, their capacity to move around the landscape and bring all of this knowledge together. So again, many, many different aspects of disciplinary science, but also transdisciplinary engagement. Now, sustainable use is really a major, major issue. Many countries around the world are very interested. I have that symbol there, number 1. Number 1 is overexploitation. Overexploitation is by far the biggest threat to marine biodiversity, and a lot of the discussion on climate is also focused on marine ecosystems. These are the ecosystems that we have, they're kind of hidden. The impact that we have on marine ecosystems is not very easy to see from the terrestrial world, but 99% of the world's biosphere, all of the place where we live, the biosphere, 99% is underwater. So it's certainly a major place where we need to think through and see how managing the oceans helps human well-being, but also the climate and other species. The point here is that we know the science. We know the science of protecting the oceans to make them more sustainable, to make them more effective in producing goods and services for humans. The science of sustainable use in fisheries is well developed. So here, the problem that we have is not a problem of knowledge, it's a problem of political will. It's of bringing together all this expertise and all this knowledge into decision making and dealing with subsidies and many other distorting forces that are present in mismanagement of these resources. So the overexploitation that I said before is an overexploitation that could be prevented by a proper management, science-driven, evidence-driven, and the information is there. There are many, many examples at a local level, at a more community level, where people can focus on sustainable use as a way to improve their well-being, support biodiversity, mitigate climate. Lots of opportunities here as well to integrate science from many disciplines into better management of the planet. And the last one that I wanted to mention is the research and public engagement. Target 14 asks the countries of the world to involve biodiversity in all levels of decision-making, public, private, at all levels. There's a strong emphasis on technology transfer, on technical capacity, not only in the kind of classical north-south way, but also south-south and triangular, meaning that many different sectors integrate. And also a global call for all the data and information to be freely available so that the people can use it in their own decision-making. What I imagine is a world where each country has a Ministry of Nature and these 12 different components that I briefly described, 3 of them, the evidence, the science, the transdisciplinary collaboration of these 12 components feed into these ministries of nature around the world. And the combination of science and public participation really leads the way forward in conservation and mitigation of climate change. Thank you so much. This is very brief, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts about this. Thank you.
Thank you, John Paul. Thank you for sharing with us the idea of global biodiversity framework from the coming Montreal Biodiversity COP. 23 targets, so here we had a look to only some of them. If I can try to sum up like 3 aspects, you say that you talked about the development of, you say that the development of the Red List Index is a scientific effort to bring together different sectors. I find it really interesting. You talk about food security from agricultures, so from genetics specialists to decision makers. That they have to work together. It's wide, it's really large. Huh? Like people working on genetics, having to talk with decision makers. And I found that's also really interesting, the protection of wild species in the context of what I would call pastoralism or raising cattle. In France, for example, we have that a lot between sheep and wolves in the mountain. And that's true, we need science information, but we need to connect to decision makers. And you said, John Paul, that sometimes it's not a problem of science. We have the information, we have the data, but more a problem of integration of science in political decisions. So if I may, John Paul, you're an ecologist, you're working with IUCN, but how do you do more in details? How do you do to better connect this reality, the science that we know, to the decision makers?
Yeah, no, it's a tricky issue. You look at the trends around the world, and in the biodiversity conventions, the decisions over the last couple of decades have the alignment between the evidence presented and the recommendations based on scientific evidence and the decisions by the parties is far from perfect. So in many cases, even though the evidence is there, the decisions are driven by other interests, driven from science and from scientific evidence. And you can see that in the climate discussion very clearly. I think that what we have to do is become better as scientists in communicating, and we have to, one thing that really troubles me is when a scientist gets asked a question, and the first thing that they say is "it depends," and then goes on into a long explanation of the assumptions and other aspects of scientific research. I think that we have to be much better at having single sentence responses, at having responses that are relevant to people's interests and concerns, really hear what people are thinking about, and then make sure that what we say responds to those questions rather to a more abstract. So there's a lot of room for improving scientific communication and for grounding that communication on people's interests. I don't think we are that good at doing that yet, and we should certainly focus on it.
Thank you. Communication is important. You say it's hard sometimes to talk to decision makers. And I will come back to you, to the panel, John Paul included. I have a question. So I think, Patricia, you already answered my question. It's what have been your most important challenge or surprise working with other disciplines, with people from other disciplines? So maybe the most important surprise or challenge for you. You still have
it's not a surprise, I guess. It's a lack of flexibility. Usually, people, we all are much more rigid that we think, that we want to think. So I think the real challenge is to be able to keep the agenda and try to surf around the waves, as we said with Francisca, and to achieve the target, because otherwise there is no way. We have faced many difficulties those years, either here for those kind of pavilion. You know, when you talk about the pavilion, it just sounds like a place, and it's not actually. There is really a purpose and a concept behind that. Inviting many ministers and countries to see the rounds. The other days, the CEO of the UN Museum told us that she was completely surprised to see for the very first time on the same place, in the same podium, a representative from the CBD, the UNFCCC and UNEP, and that was something very unique and so on. Well, it has been a huge effort to move this, and we were not alone, obviously. We are here with EPCC, with you, but to do so, you need to forget who you are, all the study you get, all the title you have, and to be able, I'm not going to say to clean the bathroom, but almost, you know. If someone has to do it, well, you have to do it. So there is no place for ego, and people need to be flexible and strong, and usually it's difficult, and I think it's a difficult job for that, actually.
Connects a bit to what Ko said before, like to create a safe room and not looking just at your title and what you were doing before.
Ko is an excellent example of that. I mean, she's in charge of everything. Since she was in the EPCC, she always had this attitude, you know, to be really in each details, and you always come back to her to ask for everything. And Francisca is the same, and you are like that. So I think that's the correct attitude, because otherwise you are technicians, but you are not a trustable person to find a solution and to find an agreement. And what happened is that at the end, at university, you learn about a subject, then you get specialized, because if you want to find a job in the market, in the very competitive market, you need to get specialized. So you are more and more specialized, at least in economy. But nothing teach you, no one's well, you don't learn, except in the real life, about the rest. So you learn during your work that you need to reach agreement with people that don't study with you for many years and so on. So yeah, it's a challenge.
That's good. So with all the schools connected together with us on Sunset. No, Christophe, don't keep the microphone. Keep it. One word from each of you, Christophe. So maybe a surprise or a challenge with your colleagues, with our colleagues at Université Côte d'Azur to work together. It's a tricky question because we work together. So.
Yeah, thanks. A surprise, maybe I'm too optimistic, but the surprise is that it works. It works sometimes. I mean, at least at the university, I fully understand your reserves and difficulties, but at least at the university, I can say that it works. Not 100%, of course, but it works very well, and the result is sometimes very pleasant.
And it's quite new also. I don't know if you.
And it's quite new as well. Yeah.
Started
So
in
2016. And the challenge, I think, the most challenging part is to explain that it takes time. And so if it takes time, it takes money. And I think that's a real challenge, because having scientists or even more from different disciplines talking to each other takes a lot of time. so that means money, and so we have to explain money makers that we need time and therefore money for free or for nothing, as you know, for just for yeah, to try to connect, and that's probably. But we have this chance at Côte d'Azur, so we have this money. It's a little bit of money, and we have no constraints on time, so we can build on.
Good. For those joining us, so Christophe Denauer is from Université Côte d'Azur, an interdisciplinary program in research. Going to Daniel, so your challenge and or surprise. So for those joining us, Daniel is from the National University of Singapore Center for International Law. Daniel Yo.
Thank you. I'll just share a little bit, not necessarily from the university, but I feel that as coming to the point about specialization for lawyers, for researchers, they are so steeped in their area that sometimes they're not so prepared to be open. And this point about ego is very important, because there's sometimes also I myself encounter ego in my role, right? And I think the ability to negotiate, the open-mindedness, readiness to listen and to let go, that you don't know everything. You may be the best in your area, but you're a novice in an area like climate. So that humility and that modesty, I think it's very important, and sometimes that's a little bit more challenging because it's all wrapped up in personality. So that's what I mean about looking for the right partners who understand the challenges. That's difficult. So when we are starting now an ASEAN network of universities, that's what we're trying to do in the region, to try and get a regional voice. But again, it's about making sure the process takes time. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. So going back to you, Marta. So again, Marta Dalla Vecchia, Science Europe, European Commission.
I agree with Christophe. I think that we realized that it works because researchers are used to work together, and so they can work also with researchers of other discipline and that are studying in other fields and so on. The problem is that they have to trust each other, one another. I have to trust that also if I am a physicist, I have to trust that also the biology is a good scientist, and he knows his matter as I know my one. So I think that this is the difficulty, the much difficulty to trust in the other when we work together.
Thank you. And so to conclude, Asuncion Cristas, so Associate Professor in Nova School of Law and former Minister of Agriculture, Environmental and Special Planning in Portugal. Surprise, challenge?
I guess that I pretty much agree what has been said concerning the difficulty in generating consensus and being able to enter into compromises. So it's difficult for people to leave their room, leave their space, leave their certainties, and come to hear the others and to be flexible and to let solutions appear. And that means that we need to enter into negotiations and we need to find out compromises. And when I have to comment what Patricia was saying about science and political decision and why it's difficult, because what surprised me most was having a law background before entering into politics. I thought that the other sciences were much more robust than they actually are. And when I started being specialists in different areas, in different kinds, I found out that it was not only, that everybody says that once you have two lawyers in a room, you always have three opinions. But then I found out that that was pretty much the same with other sciences, which is really surprising, and it's a deception because we look at science and hope, hard sciences, and hope to have the very robust and credible solutions, and they just point us a solution. Then we say, okay, this is it, just sign down. And we find out that it's not that way, and decisions and political decisions need actually to have a decision sometimes, because they need also to learn from science, reflect from science, but at the end, decide in ways that different areas of science advise in different ways. So at the end, I guess that if I had to use a metaphor, I would say that science is in the domain of romances when you think about literature, and politics is from the domain of poetry, because you need to find out creative solutions, and sometimes people don't see the reason, and sometimes you're not able to explain it. It's just a compromise, bringing all the different angles and thinking about what, in my view, in our view, in the political view, would be the best solution. But it's really challenging. All of this is really challenging. Thank you.
Thank you, Ascension. So thank you for all of you. I feel really privileged to share this moment with you. I learned a lot of things, but I think we all have in common some keywords, like, for example, different language, and we have to work together. I think you saw that. Also, John, if you want to conclude, if you're still here, John?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So, John, also on your point of view of ecologist, if you want to conclude a surprise or a challenge.
Yeah, well, for me, that what I think it resonates with other people have said, I think that there's much more in common. There's much more that we have in common than we don't. So when you look at working with other disciplines, you find that this discrepancies are maybe over 5% of the things, and of using different words to mean the same things. So I think that it's not so hard. You find the common ground and then build from there, and that has been a great surprise for me.
And it connects again to communication and science then. Okay, thank you for all of you. So I'm sure that the panelists will remain available for questions one-to-one with the audience. I see that I will just wrap up because you're a bit late for the next one, but you can directly ask your questions to the panelists right after. Okay.
Thank you. I have one question for Dr. Paolo. Thank you very much, Mr. Paolo. I'm a geneticist myself. I work with genes and DNA. I'm interested to see that what do you advise for the other 15 countries which has a very low or non-existence of biodiversity in birds? I come from UAE, and we do have an extinction of a bird called Hubara, where we supported some research in the back for conservation. But I'm working on a lot on the sequencing and for gene expression. Is there any advice on this matter, please?
Is that for me?
I guess yes, so, John, yes.
Yes, Dr. John.
Yeah, no,
yes.
Thank you. I'm very familiar with the Hubara and have been to Abu Dhabi many times. Yes, I think that the fact that I highlight the countries with more species in that graph does not mean that countries with fewer species are not important. Quite the contrary. I think that what is really important is that we all, there's no species that is less important than other species. That's the point that I want to make. And there's no effort that is less important than other efforts. So my advice would be, please build that capacity, help people in the region, because your region in my commission, in the Species Survival Commission of IUCN, one of the regions of the world with fewest members involved is West Asia, precisely. So I would invite you to support the region, support other countries, and make sure that the strong and the unique and the very special capacity that UAE has can spill over into the region.
Thank you, John. Do you want to ask another question directly, or I give you the floor after that one-to-one? So I would like to wrap up, to finish on that. So thank you again, and I think it's clear that, well, it's good. We've got a lot of work to do toward cross-disciplinary action, towards better communication also in science to make it work. We saw that at different time, but for all of you also, you're surprised it works, so it's good. Well, we'll finish on that really good news. It takes time, it takes money, but it works. So thank you again for all of you, and we all stay available for questions.